Before you skip this, before you tell yourself you'll watch it later, before your mind starts negotiating for comfort, pause. This message isn't here to entertain you. It's here to expose you. Because if you're being honest with yourself, you already know what's wrong. You know the habits that are holding you back. You know the promises you keep breaking. You know the goals you keep talking about and never fully chasing. And the uncomfortable truth is this: nobody else is responsible for that pattern but you. Not your past, not your circumstances, not the people who doubted you. Those things may have shaped your pain, but they do not control your choices today. If your life isn't moving forward, it's not because you're unlucky. It's because somewhere along the way you made comfort your priority and discipline your enemy. You don't suffer because you can't grow. You suffer because you refuse to face the version of yourself that keeps choosing what feels easy over what builds power. Every delay, every excuse, every "I'll start tomorrow" has trained your mind to believe that your word is negotiable. That training didn't happen overnight. It happened through repetition. And just like weakness is trained, strength is trained. The problem is most people never stay long enough in discomfort to let strength take root. They touch pain and run. They feel pressure and escape. They feel resistance and retreat. Then they wonder why nothing changes. Nothing changes because nothing is being challenged. There is a part of you that is tired of living beneath your potential. You feel it when you're alone. You feel it when the noise dies down and the distractions stop working. You feel it when you see someone else doing what you know you should be doing. That feeling is not jealousy. It's recognition. It's your higher self reminding you of what you're capable of becoming. But instead of listening to that voice, you drown it out with comfort, with scrolling, with excuses, with waiting for the perfect moment that never comes. The truth is, the moment never becomes perfect. You become stronger, and strength is what makes imperfect moments workable. This video is not here to hype you up for 5 minutes and then leave you the same. It's here to challenge the identity you've been protecting, because the identity you've been living from is costing you your future. You've been too gentle with your own weaknesses. You've been too patient with habits that are quietly draining your life. You've been too understanding of excuses that should have expired a long time ago. This is the moment where that ends, not with anger, but with clarity, not with motivation, but with decision. If you stay into the last second of this video, you won't just hear words. You will hear a mirror. You will see the patterns you've been repeating. You feel the pressure you've been avoiding. And if you're willing to sit in that discomfort instead of running from it, something inside you will shift. Not because I said anything magical, but because you finally decided to stop lying to yourself about what it's going to take to change your life. Weakness is not something you were born with, and it is not a permanent label stamped onto your identity. Weakness is something you practice, something you repeat. Something you repeat, something you slowly teach your mind and body through the choices you make every single day. Most people don't realize this because weakness doesn't arrive in your life as a dramatic collapse. It shows up quietly. It shows up when you delay the hard thing you know you should do. It shows up when you negotiate with your own standards. It shows up when you allow comfort to slowly replace effort. When you trade discipline for convenience, when you let one small excuse turn into a lifestyle. Over time, those tiny decisions harden into habits, and those habits begin to shape how you see yourself. You start to believe that this is just who you are. You start to say things like, "I'm just not disciplined," or "I'm not built for that," or "this is just how my life is." But that belief is not truth. It is conditioning. It is the result of repetition. And anything built by repetition can be rebuilt by repetition. Most people confuse weakness with personality. They say they are lazy, unmotivated, unlucky, distracted, or inconsistent, as if those traits were fixed. But what they are really describing are patterns of behavior they have practiced long enough that they now feel natural. The brain adapts to what you repeatedly do. If you repeatedly choose comfort over challenge, your brain becomes wired for comfort. If you repeatedly quit when things get uncomfortable, your brain learns that quitting is a valid escape route. If you repeatedly delay your responsibilities, your mind starts to associate relief with avoidance. Over time, these patterns feel like identity, but they are not identity. They are habits, and habits don't care about your intentions. They only respond to what you do consistently. That's why people can have powerful dreams and still live weak lives. Dreams live in attention. Strength is built in behavior. Weakness grows when you allow your emotions to lead your actions. Feelings are powerful, but they are unreliable leaders. Feelings change with sleep, stress, hunger, comparison, and circumstances. If you only act when you feel motivated, you are trained. Engineer yourself to be controlled by emotional weather. On good days, you move. On bad days, you stall. Over time, this creates an unstable rhythm where your progress depends on how you feel rather than what you've committed to. This emotional leadership slowly erodes your self-trust. You start to realize that you cannot rely on yourself when things get hard. That realization is dangerous because the moment you stop trusting your own ability to follow through, you lower your expectations of yourself. You start setting smaller goals, taking fewer risks, and settling for less. Weakness deepens not because you lack potential, but because you stop demanding more from yourself. Another way weakness becomes a habit is through the stories you tell yourself. The mind is constantly narrating your life. When you fail, when you hesitate, when you fall short, your inner voice interprets those moments. If your inner voice says, see, this proves you're not good enough, you reinforce weakness. If your inner voice says, this is hard for everyone, learn and move again, you build resilience. Over time, the tone of that inner voice becomes automatic. Many people unknowingly train their inner voice to be critical, dismissive, and pessimistic. They replay old mistakes, past embarrassments, and previous failures until their self-image becomes built around those moments. They carry the weight of who they were yesterday into who they believe they could be tomorrow. This is how weakness becomes identity in the mind, even though it started as a habit of interpretation, not a fact about who you are. Weakness also grows in environments that reward comfort and discourage effort. If you surround yourself with people who normalize quitting, who joke about laziness, who downplay discipline, you begin to all feel that your weaker choices are acceptable. The environment shapes your standards. If everyone around you avoids responsibility, your own avoidance feels less severe. If everyone around you complains about life without changing their behavior, your own complaints feel justified. Over time, your standards quietly drop to match the room you're in. You don't wake up one day and decide to be weak. You adapt to what's normal around you, and whatever becomes normal begins to feel like who you are. This is why changing habits often requires changing what you tolerate, what you consume, and who you listen to. You cannot build strength in an environment that constantly feeds weakness. The most dangerous part about weakness as a habit is that it gives short-term relief. Skipping the hard task feels good in the moment. Avoiding the uncomfortable conversation feels safe. Choosing entertainment over effort feels relaxing. But each time you choose short-term relief, you trade long-term respect for yourself. The pain of discipline is delayed gratification. The pain of weakness is delayed regret. One strengthens you. The other slowly eats away at your confidence. People often think they're avoiding pain when they choose comfort, but they are only postponing pain into a heavier form. Regret weighs more than effort. The regret of wasted potential, missed chances, and unrealized dreams becomes a quiet background noise in your life. You might still laugh, still function, still survive, but deep down there is a constant sense that you are underliving your own capacity. That internal tension is the cost of practicing weakness long enough for it to feel like identity. Breaking the habit of weakness doesn't require a dramatic transformation overnight. It requires interrupting the pattern consistently. The moment you choose the hard action, when you don't feel like it, you begin to rewrite your conditioning. The first few times will feel unnatural because you are acting against your current wiring. Your mind will resist. Your body will resist. Your old identity will try to pull you back into familiar comfort. This resistance is not a sign that you are incapable. It is a sign that you are changing the pattern. Every time you act in alignment with discipline instead of emotion, you send a new signal to your brain about who you are becoming. Over time, that signal strengthens. What once felt forced begins to feel normal. What once felt impossible begins to feel expected. This is how habits transform identity, not through declarations, but through repeated proof. As you build new habits, your self-image begins to change naturally. You don't have to convince yourself that you are strong. You experience yourself being strong. You keep small promises to yourself. You follow through when it's inconvenient. You show up when it's boring. These moments stack into evidence, and evidence is more powerful than motivation. Your mind starts to trust you again. You start to see yourself as someone who moves even when it's uncomfortable. That shift in self-perception changes the ceiling of what you believe is possible for your life. Opportunities you once avoided begin to feel reachable. Challenges you once feared begin to feel like invitations to grow. This is not because your circumstances suddenly become easy, but because your habits have reshaped how you respond to difficulty. Weakness is not who you are, it is what you have practiced. And strength is not something you discover. It is something you build by choosing differently again and again, especially when nobody is watching. The moment you understand that your current state is not your identity, but the result of your habits, you regain power over your future. You are no longer trapped by who you've been. You are guided by what you repeatedly do next. Pain has been misunderstood for so long that most people automatically treat it like an enemy that must be avoided at all costs. The moment something becomes uncomfortable, the instinct is to pull away, to escape, to distract, to numb, or to delay. This reaction feels natural because the body and mind are designed to seek safety. But safety and growth do not live in the same place. Growth lies where your limits are challenged, where your comfort is disturbed, where your old patterns no longer protect you. Comfort, on the other hand, is a warm cage. It doesn't hurt you immediately. It soothes you, relaxes you, and convinces you that you're okay staying exactly as you are. Over time, that soothing turns into stagnation. A tragedy is not that comfort feels good. The tragedy is not that comfort feels good. The tragedy is that comfort slowly steals your hunger to become more. Pain is information. It tells you that something is changing, stretching, breaking, or demanding your attention. Physical pain during training signals that your body is adapting to stress. Emotional pain after rejection or failure signals that your identity and expectations are being challenged. Mental pain during focused work signals that your brain is being pushed beyond its usual patterns. None of this pain is pleasant, but all of it is purposeful. When you treat pain as a signal rather than a threat, your relationship with discomfort changes. You stop asking, how do I make this stop? And start asking, what is this trying to teach me? That shift in perspective is powerful because it turns moments of struggle into moments of growth instead of moments of retreat. Comfort, in contrast, is seductive because it feels harmless. Rest is healthy when it follows effort. Comfort becomes dangerous when it replaces effort. There is a difference between recovery and avoidance. Recovery restores you so you can return stronger. Avoidance trains you to run from difficulty. Many people confuse the two. They tell themselves they are protecting their mental health when they are actually protecting their comfort zone. They tell themselves they are being patient when they are actually being passive. Up doesn't demand anything from you. It doesn't challenge your excuses. It doesn't question your potential. It simply lets you stay where you are. And that is why comfort is more dangerous than pain. Pain confronts you. Comfort pacifies you. When you consistently choose comfort over pain, you teach your nervous system that discomfort is something to fear. Over time, your tolerance for struggle shrinks. Small challenges begin to feel overwhelming. Minor setbacks feel like major threats. Your resilience weakens because you are no longer practicing resilience. Just like muscles, resilience grows when it is stretched and shrinks when it is protected from effort. A life built around avoiding pain becomes fragile. Any unexpected pressure feels unbearable because you have not trained yourself to carry weight. This is why people who have lived overly protected lives often struggle the most when reality hits hard. They have not developed the inner strength that comes from facing discomfort and surviving it. Pain also sharpens your focus. When you are uncomfortable, your attention becomes intense. You become aware of what matters. Discomfort strips away distractions because it forces you to comfort. On reality, when you are too comfortable, your focus scatters. You drift. You procrastinate. You numb yourself with noise. Comfort dulls urgency. Pain creates urgency. Urgency is not panic. It is clarity. It is the realization that something must change. Without that pressure, many people never find the reason to move. They wait for perfect conditions, for confidence, for certainty. Pain disrupts that waiting. It forces a decision. Either you adapt or you remain stuck in the same patterns that created the discomfort in the first place. Avoiding pain also means avoiding feedback. Failure, rejection, and struggle are feedback systems. They show you where your skills are lacking, where your strategy needs improvement, and where your mindset is limiting you. If you avoid situations that might cause pain, you also avoid the information that would help you grow. You stay ignorant of your weaknesses, not because they aren't there, but because you refuse to look at them. Comfort protects your ego by keeping you away from situations where you might fail. But in doing so, it also protects your limitations. You remain the same person year after year, not because you couldn't grow, but because you chose not to face the discomfort that growth requires. There is also a deep emotional cost to choosing comfort over pain. When you repeatedly avoid what challenges you, a quiet sense of dissatisfaction builds inside. You may not always be aware of it, but it shows up as restlessness, boredom, and a feeling that something is missing. This is the tension between your current self and your potential self. Your potential self knows what you are capable of becoming. Your current self knows what you are choosing instead. The gap between those two creates internal pressure. People often try to numb that pressure with entertainment, substances, or endless distractions, but the pressure doesn't disappear. It waits. It waits until the distractions fade and you are left alone with the truth that you have been choosing comfort over becoming. Choosing pain does not mean seeking suffering for its own sake. It means choosing the kind of discomfort that leads to growth. There is constructive pain and destructive pain. Constructive pain comes from effort, discipline, learning, and honest self-examination. Destructive pain comes from self-sabotage, toxic environments, and neglecting your well-being. The difference lies in intention and direction. Constructive pain moves you forward, even though it hurts. Destructive pain keeps you stuck, even though it feels familiar. Learning to choose the right kind of pain is a form of wisdom. It requires you to tolerate temporary discomfort for long-term strength. As you begin to choose growth over comfort, your relationship with pain evolves. Pain no longer feels like a threat to your identity. It feels like a signal that you are stepping into something new. The fear doesn't disappear, but your willingness to move through fear grows. You start to see discomfort as a companion on the path to becoming more capable, more resilient, more alive. This shift builds confidence because you no longer need life to be easy in order to function. You learn that you can carry weight, endure pressure, and recover from setbacks. That knowledge becomes a quiet form of power. You stop seeing yourself as fragile. You start seeing yourself as adaptable. Comfort will always be available. There will always be reasons to stay where you are. There will always be justifications for delaying the hard work, the honest conversation, the disciplined routine. But comfort never builds the life you secretly want. The life you want is built in moments when you choose the uncomfortable action over the easy excuse. Every time you step into constructive pain, you expand your capacity. You become someone who can handle more responsibility, more pressure, more opportunity. Over time, your tolerance for discomfort increases, and what once felt unbearable becomes manageable. That is growth. Not the absence of pain, but the ability to move through it without losing yourself. Most people wait for motivation to move, and then they wonder why their lives stay the same. Motivation is emotional. It rises and falls based on mood, energy, confidence, and circumstance. Some days you feel powerful and ready to take on the world. Other days you feel tired, uncertain, and heavy. If your progress depends on how you feel, your progress will always be inconsistent. This is why discipline is not optional for anyone who wants to change their life. Discipline is what carries you on the days when motivation disappears. It is the structure you lean on when your emotions are unreliable. It is the agreement you make with your future self to show up even when your present self wants to hide. When motivation fades, many people interpret that feeling as a sign to stop. They tell themselves they need to get their energy back or wait until they feel ready. In reality, readiness is often created by action, not the other way around. The body and mind respond to movement. When you take the first step, even without motivation, you often find that energy follows action. Discipline works in the opposite direction of motivation. Motivation says, I feel good, so I'll act. Discipline says, I'll act so I can become good. Over time, discipline says your mind too. Associate action with stability rather than emotion. You stop waiting for the perfect feeling and start building progress on imperfect days. This is how consistency is born. Discipline is a form of self-respect. When you keep promises to yourself, you reinforce the belief that your word matters. When you break promises to yourself, you weaken your own authority in your mind. Many people struggle with confidence not because they lack talent, but because they don't trust themselves to follow through. They've made too many commitments to themselves and quietly abandoned them. Each broken promise chips away at self-belief. Discipline rebuilds that trust. It is the daily proof that you are reliable to yourself. Over time, this proof becomes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who does what they say they will do. Discipline also removes decision fatigue. When your actions depend on mood, you are constantly negotiating with yourself. Should I do it today or tomorrow? Do I feel like it is now the right time? This mental negotiation drains energy and creates friction. Disciplines energy and creates friction. Disciplines your life by turning actions into non-negotiables. You don't debate whether you show up. You show up because that's the standard you've set. This frees mental space. Instead of wasting energy on internal arguments, you use that energy to execute. The simplicity of discipline creates momentum. Momentum makes progress feel lighter over time because you are no longer fighting yourself at every step. There will be moments when discipline feels heavy. It will feel restrictive. It will feel unfair. You might look at others who seem to live more freely and wonder why you are choosing the harder path. But discipline is not punishment. It is dared action. It is choosing the discomfort of structure over the chaos of inconsistency. Inconsistency feels free in the moment because you can follow your impulses, but over time, inconsistency traps you in cycles of starting and stopping, building and losing momentum, hoping and then giving up. Discipline feels heavy at first because you are carrying responsibility. Over time, it feels lighter because responsibility creates stability. Stability creates confidence. Confidence makes effort feel purposeful instead of exhausting. Discipline teaches you to separate feelings from actions. You learn that you can feel tired and still work. You can feel afraid and still move forward. You can feel afraid and still practice. This separation is powerful because it prevents temporary emotions from controlling long-term outcomes. Emotions are meant to be experienced, not obeyed. When you obey every feeling, you give your inner state control over your outer life. Discipline reclaims that control. It doesn't deny your feelings. It simply refuses to let them dictate your behavior. This builds emotional resilience. You become someone who can experience discomfort without collapsing into it. Over time, discipline changes your relationship with yourself. You begin to see yourself as capable of enduring effort. You stop identifying as someone who needs perfect conditions to perform. You realize that you can operate in imperfect conditions and still make progress. This realizing is liberating. It means you no longer need life to be ideal, to move forward. You can build your life in the middle of chaos, fatigue, doubt, and uncertainty. That ability is what separates people who talk about change from people who create it. The creators are not always more talented. They are more disciplined. Discipline also protects your future self. Every disciplined action is a gift to the version of you that will exist months or years from now. When you train today, your future self benefits from a stronger body. When you study today, your future self benefits from deeper skill. When you save or invest today, your future self benefits from stability. Weakness lives in the present moment. Focus only on immediate comfort. Disciplined lives in the future, willing to endure short-term discomfort for long-term freedom. When you consistently choose discipline, you are choosing to be kind to the person you are becoming, even when the person you are right now would prefer ease. There will be setbacks. Discipline does not mean perfection. It means returning to the standard when you fall. The disciplined person is not the one who never slips. It is the one who does not use slipping as an excuse to quit entirely. One missed day does not erase progress. The danger is turning one missed day into a story about failure. Discipline teaches you to recover quickly. It teaches you to respond to setbacks with recommitment instead of self-judgment. This ability to reset without spiraling is part of emotional maturity. It keeps you moving forward instead of getting stuck in shame. When motivation dies, discipline carries the weight. It carries you through boredom, resistance, and doubt. It is the quiet force that builds strength in the background while you are focused on surviving the background, while you are focused on surviving the day. Over time, you realize that discipline is not something you force yourself into forever. It becomes who you are. You become someone who moves even when it's hard, who keeps promises to themselves, who doesn't need emotional fireworks to take responsibility. That identity is powerful because it is stable. It does not depend on mood, seasons, or circumstances. It depends on standards. Its standards, once built, hold you up when everything else falls apart. Your environment is never neutral. It is either pushing you forward or quietly pulling you backward, shaping your standards, your expectations, and the level of effort you believe is normal. Every place you spend time in at, every voice you listen to, every piece of content you consume is influencing what you tolerate in your own life. You might believe you are making independent choices, but your environment is constantly nudging those choices in subtle ways. If the people around you normalize laziness, your moments of laziness feel harmless. If the people around you joke about giving up, your own quitting feels justified. If your environment celebrates discipline, effort, and growth, your weaker moments begin to feel out of place. Over time, what feels normal becomes who you become. Most people underestimate how deeply their surroundings shape their behavior. You don't wake up one day and decide to lower your standards. You adapt to what is around you. If your daily environment is filled with distraction, noise, and low expectations, your mind gradually accepts that as the baseline. Your attention becomes scattered. Your goals feel distant. Your urgency fades. This isn't because you lack ambition, but because your environment is feeding your nervous system signals that nothing urgent is required. In contrast, when you place yourself in environments where effort is visible, where progress is discussed, where discipline is respected, your nervous system adapts in the opposite direction. Your standards rise because you are surrounded by evidence that higher standards are possible. What you repeatedly see becomes what you subconsciously believe is achievable. Your environment also shapes how seriously you take your own goals. If you share your dreams with people who mock ambition or treat improvement as naive, you slowly learn to hide your goals. You shrink your vision to avoid being judged. You start telling yourself that aiming high is unrealistic. This social pressure doesn't have to be direct to be powerful. Sometimes it shows up as jokes, sarcasm, or indifference. Over time, this erodes your willingness to fully commit to your own growth. You begin to water down your effort so you don't stand out. You become careful not to threaten the comfort of those around you. In doing so, you trade your potential for belonging. The environment wins not because it is strong, but because it is constant. Digital environments matter just as much as physical ones. The content you scroll through trades your attention and expectations. If your feed is filled with endless entertainment, outrage, and comparison, your mind becomes conditioned to seek stimulation instead of progress. You become reactive instead of intentional. Your brain learns to crave quick dopamine hits instead of delayed rewards. Over time, this weakens your ability to focus on slow, meaningful work. It becomes harder to sit with boredom, harder to commit to long-term goals, harder to tolerate the quiet effort that real growth requires. Your digital environment can either sharpen your focus or sedate your ambition. The choice of what you consume daily is a choice about who you are training your mind to become. Your physical environment also sends signals to your behavior. A cluttered space encourages mental clutter. A chaotic routine encourages inconsistency. A noisy environment encourages distraction. You may think you can rise above easy conditions, and sometimes you can in short bursts, but over time, the environment wears you down. Willpower is limited. Structure is supportive. When your environment is designed to reduce friction for good habits, you conserve energy for the work that matters. When your environment is filled with friction for good habits and ease for bad habits. You constantly have to fight yourself. This constant internal battle drains you and makes discipline feel heavier than it needs to be. Designing your environment to support growth is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is understanding that strength is easier to build when the ground beneath you is solid. The people you keep closest have a powerful effect on what you tolerate. You absorb their language, their beliefs, their attitudes toward effort and responsibility. If the people around you blame the world for their problems, you begin to see the world as an enemy instead of a challenge. If the people around you take ownership of their lives, you begin to feel that ownership is possible for you too. This doesn't mean you need to abandon everyone who is struggling. It means you need to be honest about how much influence certain voices have over your mindset. Being constantly surrounded by negativity, excuses, and complacency slowly dulls your edge. Even if you are disciplined, that constant exposure creates emotional friction. You begin to fight not just your own resistance, but the resistance of your environment. Your environment also determines how much pressure you feel to grow. In some spaces, growth is expected. Effort is respected. Progress is normal. In those environments, staying stagnant feels uncomfortable. That discomfort pushes you forward. In other spaces, stagnation is normal. Effort is mocked. Comfort is celebrated. In those environments, growth feels uncomfortable. You feel out of place when you push yourself. The environment pressures you to return to the average. This is why growth often requires leaving familiar rooms. Not because those rooms are evil, but because they are built for a different version of you. The person you are becoming may not fit in the places that shaped who you were. Holding on to old environments out of loyalty can quietly hold you back from becoming who you are meant to be. Your environment can either challenge us or enable you. A challenging environment exposes your weaknesses and pushes you to improve them. An enabling environment hides your weaknesses and allows them to remain. Both feel different emotionally. Challenging environments feel uncomfortable because they stretch you. Enabling environments feel comfortable because they protect you from confrontation. The problem is that protection from confrontation also protects your limitations. If you are never challenged, you are never forced to grow. If you are never held to higher standards, you never build higher standards for yourself. Growth requires friction. Your environment can provide that friction or remove it. Removing friction feels kind in the short term, but it can be cruel in the long term if it keeps you small. Taking control of your environment is an act of self-respect. It is choosing to place yourself in spaces that demand more from you than you are currently giving. It is choosing to listen to voices that challenge you instead of only those that comfort you. It is choosing to design your surroundings so that the better choice is easier to make than the weaker one. This does not mean you will never struggle. It means your struggle will be against meaningful resistance instead of stagnant distraction. Over time, this alignment between your environment and your goals creates momentum. You no longer have to fight the world and yourself at the same time. Your environment begins to work with you instead of against you. When your environment sharpens you, your standards rise naturally. You begin to expect more from yourself because more is expected around you. You stop negotiating with mediocrity because mediocrity feels out of place. This shift is subtle but powerful. It changes what you tolerate, what you excuse, and what you pursue. You don't have to become harder on yourself in a harsh way. You become clearer about the kind of life you are building and the kind of environments that support that life. Over time, this clarity creates distance between you and the weaker version of yourself, not through force, but through alignment. Most people secretly wait for someone to rescue them from their own life. They wait for the right person to believe in them, for the perfect opportunity to appear, for circumstances to become fair, for motivation to arrive from the outside. This waiting feels hopeful, but it is a subtle form of surrender. It places the responsibility for your future in hands that are not yours. The moment you realize that nobody is coming to save you is not a moment of despair. It is a moment of power. It is the moment you reclaim ownership over your direction, your discipline, and your self-respect. When you stop outsourcing your growth to luck, people or timing, you begin to stand on your own standards instead of standing on borrowed validation. Self-respect is built in solitude because solitude removes the audience. When nobody is watching, your choices reveal your true standards. It is easy to look disciplined in public. It is easy to pee a whine when there is praise, recognition, or accountability from others. The real test of character happens in quiet moments when no one will applaud your effort and no one will punish your laziness. In those moments, you either keep your word to yourself or you don't. Over time, these private decisions become the foundation of how you see yourself. If you consistently abandon your commitments when no one is watching, you teach your mind that your promises are optional. If you consistently follow through in solitude, you teach your mind that your standards are real. That internal trust is the root of self-respect. Waiting for rescue often shows up as subtle dependency on external validation. You look to others to confirm your worth. You look for praise to justify your effort. You look for permission before you take yourself seriously. This creates a fragile sense of confidence that rises and falls based on how others respond to you. When people support you, you feel strong. When they doubt you or ignore you, you feel small. This emotional dependency makes your progress unstable because it is tied to reactions you cannot control. Self-respect built in solitude is stable because it does not depend on applause. It depends on your own alignment with your values. You begin to act with integrity, even when no one is clapping. That integrity becomes a quiet source of confidence that does not collapse when external validation disappears. Solitude also exposes your excuses. When you are alone with your thoughts, there is no one else to blame. You can't hide behind distractions forever. Eventually, you confront the gap between what you say you want and what you actually do. This confrontation is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Avoiding solitude keeps you from seeing this gap clear early. People often fill their lives with noise, people, and stimulation to avoid facing their own inconsistency. But growth requires that honest confrontation. When you sit with yourself and acknowledge where you have been avoiding responsibility, you regain the power to change. This honesty is an act of self-respect because it treats your potential seriously instead of protecting your ego. When you accept that nobody is coming to save you, you stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop delaying action until you feel confident, supported, or fully prepared. You begin to move with what you have, where you are. This shift changes your relationship with fear. Fear no longer becomes a stop sign. It becomes a signal that you are stepping into something that matters. You stop interpreting fear as a reason to wait and start interpreting it as a reason to grow. This doesn't mean fear disappears. It means fear loses its authority over your decisions. You learn to act with fear present instead of waiting for fear present, instead of waiting for fear to leave. That ability is a form of emotional independence. It frees you from being controlled by your internal state. Solitude builds resilience because it forces you to rely on your own inner resources. When you face challenges alone, you learn that you can survive discomfort without external reassurance. You learn that your own commitment can carry you through moments of doubt. This doesn't mean you never seek support. It means you don't collapse when support is unavailable. There is a difference between healthy interdependence and helpless dependence. Healthy interdependence means you appreciate support but do not require it to function. Helpless dependence means you stall when support is missing. Building self-respect in solitude moves you toward healthy interdependence. You become capable of standing on your own while still valuing connection. Many people avoid solitude because it reveals parts of themselves they're not proud of. They see their procrastinance, their inconsistency, their unresolved emotions. This discomfort is actually an invitation. It is an invitation to rebuild your relationship with yourself. Self-respect grows when you address these patterns instead of running from them. Each time you choose to show up for yourself in a quiet moment, you reinforce the belief that you are worth the effort. This belief does not come from affirmations alone. It comes from action. It comes from doing the difficult, boring, and uncomfortable things that align with who you want to become, even when no one will ever know you did them. Over time, this private integrity changes how you move in public. You no longer need to prove yourself loudly because you have proven yourself privately. You no longer seek constant reassurance because you trust your own commitment. You no longer depend on others to hold you accountable because you hold yourself accountable. This internal shift changes your presence. People may not know what has changed, but they feel there is a steadiness in someone who has built self-respect in solitude. Their confidence is quiet. Their actions are consistent. Their boundaries are clearer. They are not easily swayed by approval or disapproval because their core sense of worth is not outsourced to the crowd. Accepting that nobody is coming to save you does not mean you become cold or disconnected. It means you become responsible for your own growth. You stop waiting for someone to make you disciplined, confident, or focused. You stop waiting for life to make sense before you commit to your values. You begin to create structure for yourself. You design your days with intention. You choose standards that reflect who you want to become rather than who you have been. This self-directed approach to life builds a quiet strength. You no longer see yourself as a passenger in your own story. You become the one setting direction even when the road is unclear. Self-respect built in solitude becomes the foundation for every other form of growth. Without it, discipline feels forced, confidence feels fragile, and ambition feels unstable. With it, your actions align more naturally with your values. You begin to respect your time, your energy, and your potential. You become less tolerant of habits that drain you and more committed to habits that drain you and more committed to habits that strengthen you. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It happens through thousands of small choices made when no one is watching. Those choices quietly shape who you become. Most people think they will rise to the level of their dreams, but life doesn't work that way. Dreams are emotional. They are fueled by imagination, hope, and desire. Standards are structural. They are the roles you live by when emotions change, when pressure hits, when fatigue sets in, when disappointment shows up. You do not magically perform at the level of what you wish for. You default to what you have trained yourself to accept as normal. This is why so many people have big dreams and small daily actions. Their vision is high, but their standards are low. The gap between those two is where frustration lives. You don't fail because your dreams are too big. You fail because your standards are too weak to support the weight of those dreams. Standards are the invisible floor beneath your life. They determine what behavior you tolerate from yourself. They determine what behavior you tolerate from yourself. They decide how early you wake up, how focused you work, how you respond to setbacks, and how quickly you recover from failure. When standards are low, excuses feel reasonable. Skipping one day feels harmless. Cutting corners feels justified. Over time, these small allowances become patterns. Those patterns shape your outcomes. You may still talk about your dreams, but your daily behavior is quietly voting for a different future. This internal contradiction creates emotional fatigue. You feel torn between who you want to be and what you repeatedly allow yourself to be. The frustration you feel is not because the dream is unrealistic. It is because your standards are not aligned with the dream you claim to want. Dreams are seductive because they make you feel powerful without requiring immediate change. You can imagine a different future without confronting your current habits. Standards force confrontation. They require you to look at what you tolerate in your daily life. They force you to define what is acceptable behavior for yourself, even when it is uncomfortable. This is why standards feel restricted at first. They limit your choices in the short term. You can no longer follow every impulse. You can no longer negotiate with every feeling. But this restriction is what creates freedom later. When your standards are high, your future options expand. You build skills, discipline, and reliability. When your standards are low, your present options feel wide open, but your future options shrink. You trade long-term freedom for short-term flexibility. Under pressure, you don't think your way into higher performance. You fall back on what you have practiced. If you have practiced consistency, you become consistent under stress. If you have practiced avoidance, you avoid under stress. If you have practiced discipline, you become disciplined when things get hard. This is why standards matter more than intentions. Intentions disappear under pressure. Standards remain. They are built through repetition. They become automatic responses. When you are tired, stressed, or afraid, You don't rise to who you hope to be. You become who you have trained yourself to be. This can feel discouraging, but it is actually empowering. It means you are not at the mercy of your emotions. You can train your default responses. You can raise your standards one decision at a time. Raising your standards does not mean becoming harsh or perfectionistic. It means becoming clear about what you allow. It means deciding in advance how you will behave in predictable situations. When you decide ahead of time that you will show up even when you don't feel like it, you remove the daily negotiation. When you decide that skipping your commitments is not an option, you protect your future from your momentary moods. This clarity reduces internal conflict. You no longer argue with yourself about what to do. You follow the standard you set. This reduces decision fatigue and builds momentum. Over time, your higher standards begin to feel normal. What once felt strict becomes your baseline. This is how growth becomes sustainable instead of dramatic but temporary. People often mistake high standards for arrogance or rigidity. In reality, high standards are a form of humility. They acknowledge that feelings are unreliable and that structure is necessary. They accept that the human mind seeks comfort and that boundaries are needed to counter that tendency. High standards are not about proving superiority to others. They are about protecting your own potential from your own inconsistency. When you raise your dogs, you are not judging yourself for being imperfect. You are simply refusing to let imperfection dictate your direction. You allow mistakes, but you do not allow them to redefine your commitment. You allow rest, but you do not allow rest to become avoidance. This balance is what keeps standards healthy rather than oppressive. The difference between people who make progress and people who stay stuck is often not talent or intelligence. It is the floor they refuse to drop below. Some people have a low tolerance for inconsistency. They feel uncomfortable when they miss a commitment. They correct quickly. Others have a high tolerance for inconsistency. They normalize miscommitments. Over time, this tolerance shapes outcomes. If you tolerate low effort, low focus, and low discipline from yourself, you build a life that reflects those tolerances. If you refuse to tolerate those patterns, you build a different life. This refusal is not loud. It is quiet and consistent. It shows up in how quickly you get back on track, how seriously you take your commitments, and how you respond to your own excuses. Your standards also shape your identity. You become what you consistently accept from yourself. If you accept that you can quit when things get hard, you become someone who quits under pressure. If you accept that you can show up even when things are hard, you become someone who is reliable under pressure. This identity then feeds back into your confidence. You trust yourself because you have evidence of your own reliability. This trust makes you more willing to pursue challenging goals because you believe you can carry the weight of the process. People with low standards often avoid big goals, not because they lack ambition, but because they subconsciously know their curve. Yet these standards cannot support those goals. Raising your standards cannot support those goals. Raising your standards expands the size of the goals you can realistically pursue. When life hits you unexpectedly, you do not have time to consult your dreams. You fall back on your habits, your routines, your standards. This is why building strong standards before pressure arrives is essential. You cannot build resilience in a moment of crisis. You build it in the ordinary days when you choose discipline over ease. These ordinary choices create extraordinary stability. Over time, you become someone who does not collapse under pressure because pressure is not foreign to you. You have trained yourself to function under it. This training is not glamorous. It is repetitive. It is quiet, but it is powerful. Dreams give you direction. Standards give you traction. Without standards, dreams remain ideas. With standards, dreams become reachable because your daily behavior is aligned with your vision. You stop hoping your way into a different life and start building your way into one. This shift changes how you experience setbacks. Setbacks no longer feel like proof that your dream is impossible. They feel like part of the process that your standards are designed to carry you through. You become less emotionally reactive and more structurally resilient. That resilience is what allows you to move forward even when your feelings are uncertain. The idea of becoming a monster is often misunderstood. People hear that word and imagine aggression, cruelty, or domination. But the monster in this context is not about hurting others. It is about building a disciplined version of yourself that is strong enough to protect your future from your present weaknesses. It is about developing an inner force that does not negotiate with excuses, does not collapse under pressure, and does not betray long-term goals for short-term comfort. This inner force is not loud. It is not performative. It is quiet, relentless, and rooted in standards. It exists to guard your future from the parts of you that would sabotage it. Every person carries conflicting impulses inside. Every person carries conflicting impulses inside. What part of you wants ease, pleasure, and immediate relief from discomfort? Another part of you wants growth, meaning, and long-term fulfillment. The monster is the disciplined side that steps in when these impulses collide. It is the part of you that says no to the comfortable choice and yes to the necessary one. This is not about suppressing your humanity. It is about organizing it. Without this inner discipline, your life becomes reactive. You chase whatever feels good in the moment and then deal with the consequences later. The monster protects you from that pattern by imposing structure on your impulses. It is not cruel. It is responsible. The monster is built through boundaries. Boundaries with your time, your energy, your habits, and your environment. Each boundary is a decision about what you will and will not tolerate from yourself. When you say you will wake up at a certain time and you follow through, you strengthen this inner protector. When you say you will train, study, or work regardless of mood and you follow through, you strengthen it again. Over time, these repeated acts of self-command create an internal authority. You begin to trust that when you decide something matters, you will act accordingly. This trust is the foundation of personal power. Without it, intentions remain fragile because you know you might abandon them when things get hard. The monster also protects your future from distractions. Modern life is full of noise designed to pull your attention away from meaningful work. Distractions promise comfort, entertainment, and escape. The disciplined part of you sees these temptations for what they are. Short-term relief that steals long-term progress. The monster does not eliminate pleasure. It regulates it. It decides when rest is recovery and when rest is avoidance. It decides when entertainment is healthy and when it is becoming a pattern of escape. Its discernment is not automatic. It is built through awareness and repetition. Each time you choose focus over distraction, you strengthen your ability to protect your future from being diluted by constant noise. Another role of this inner discipline is to protect your future from emotional volatility. Emotions are powerful, but temporary. Decisions made in emotional extremes often lead to outcomes you later regret. When you are tired, angry, lonely, or discouraged, your judgment can become distorted. The monster acts as a stabilizing force during these moments. It does not deny your emotions, but it refuses to let them dictate decisions that affect your long-term direction. It reminds you of your standards when your feelings are trying to rewrite them. Over time, this creates emotional resilience. You become someone who can experience strong emotions without letting those emotions hijack your life. This is not emotional suppression. It is emotional regulation in service of your future self. The monster is also built through the willingness to endure discomfort for a meaningful reason. Protecting your future requires you to accept temporary discomfort, training when you are tired, saying no when you want to say yes, choosing effort over ease, choosing preparation over procrastination. These choices do not feel heroic in the moment. They feel inconvenient. But over time, they accumulate into a life that is structurally stronger. The monster understands delayed gratification. It understands that your future self will either thank you or resent you based on the decisions you make today. This perspective shifts how you experience sacrifice. Sacrifice stops feeling like loss and starts feeling like investment. The disciplined version of you also protects your future from the erosion of self-respect. Each time you betray your old standards, you weaken your trust in yourself. Over time, this erosion leads to self-doubt and hesitation. You stop believing that you can follow through. So you stop setting ambitious goals. The monster reverses this erosion by enforcing alignment between your values and your actions. Each time you act in alignment with what you say matters to you, You reinforce self-trust. This trust becomes confidence. Not loud confidence, but grounded confidence, rooted in evidence. You know who you are because you have seen yourself show up when it was hard. This internal evidence is more powerful than any external validation. The monster also protects your future from repeating past patterns. Many people carry habits that once served as coping mechanisms, but now limit growth. These patterns might include avoidance, procrastination, self-sabotage, or numbing behaviors. Without conscious discipline, these patterns repeat. Automatically, even when they no longer serve you. The monster interrupts these cycles. It notices the urge to fall back into familiar but limiting behavior and chooses a different response. This interruption is uncomfortable because it breaks familiarity. Familiarity feels safe. Even when it is harmful, the monster chooses unfamiliar growth over familiar stagnation. Over time, new patterns replace old ones. And what once felt unnatural becomes your new normal. Protecting your future also means protecting your identity. The stories you tell yourself about who you are influence what you believe is possible for you. If your identity is built around being inconsistent, unmotivated, or unlucky, your actions will unconsciously align with that story. The monster challenges these identity stories through action. It creates new evidence that contradicts old labels. Why? Stop thinking of yourself as someone who tries. Thinking of yourself as someone who tries, and start seeing yourself as someone who follows through. This shift in identity changes your trajectory. You begin to pursue opportunities that align with your new self-concept. The monster does not argue with old stories. It outgrows them. Over time, the monster becomes less about force and more about alignment. In the beginning, discipline feels like something you impose on yourself. As your standards become internalized, discipline becomes part of who you are. You no longer feel like you are fighting yourself as often. Your actions align more naturally with your values. This does not mean life becomes easy. It means your inner structure becomes strong enough to carry weight without constant internal conflict. You experience less friction because you have reduced the gap between what you say matters and what you actually do. A monster exists to serve your highest aims. It is not an enemy of joy. It protects the kind of joy that is built, not borrowed. It protects the satisfaction that comes from earned progress, not momentary escape. It ensures that your future is shaped by intentional decisions rather than reactive habits. By building this disciplined inner force, you are choosing to be loyal to the person you are becoming. You are choosing to protect that future from the weaker patterns of your past. You've had to raise money, a dog fight. You had to raise the truth tonight, and the truth doesn't come to comfort you. It comes to confront you. Somewhere inside you is a version of yourself that you've been protected from pain, from effort, from pressure, and from responsibility. That version feels safe, but that version is costing you your future. Every time you choose comfort over growth, you are quietly voting against the life you say you want. Every time you delay what you know you should do, you are teak in your mind that your word does not matter. And every time you let weakness speak louder than discipline, you are building a future you will one day have to live. Where this is not about guilt. This is about ownership. Because the moment you take ownership of your choices is the moment your life becomes changeable. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need a perfect timing. You don't need perfect timing. You don't need permission from anyone in your life. What you need is a decision that is stronger than your feelings. Your feelings will try to negotiate with you tomorrow. They will tell you to rest when you should rise, to wait when you should move, to stay small when you should step forward. If you let those feelings lead, nothing changes. But if you decide tonight that your standards are non-negotiable, your future begins to shift the moment this video ends, not because life becomes easier, but because you become stronger. And strength changes how you experience difficulty. Difficulty no longer defines you. It sharpens you. You are not behind in life. You are not broken. You are not incapable. You are simply undertrained in the habits that build power, that can change. Not in a year, not next month, It changes in the next decision you make. It changes when you choose to do the uncomfortable thing instead of the familiar one. It changes when you show up for yourself when no one is watching. It changes when you stop waiting for motivation and start acting from commitment. These small decisions don't look impressive in the moment, but they compound into a version of you that you won't recognize in the best way. Imagine meeting yourself 1 year from now. That version of you is built by what you choose to do starting now. Not by what you watch, not by what you promise, not by what you promise, not by what you plan. By what you practice. Your future self is either going to thank you for the discipline you start today or resent you for the comfort you choose again tonight. That future is being shaped quietly, moment by moment, by choices that seem small right now. There is no dramatic turning point waiting for you. A turning point is you deciding that the old version of you no longer gets to make the decisions. So when this video ends and the noise of the world comes back, remember this moment. Remember that you felt something shift inside. Don't let that feeling fade into another moment of inspiration that dies with the screen. Turn this emotion into action. Take one step. Do one hard thing. Keep one promise to yourself today. Then do it again tomorrow. That's how weakness ends. Not with a speech, but with a standard you refuse to drop.